This guy was treated as useless and was always beaten to a pulp during training. However, his life changed when he went on a journey and encountered a man with beasts who chased him to the brink of death. He ended up in an unknown dimension where he trained for 100,000 years. In this dungeon, he defeated all the powerful creatures and even made the Demon King surrender after seeing his status. He gained almost every type of resistance and learned all kinds of magic in unique ways. But before I spoil too much, let's dive into the story. In a castle nearby, the people were buzzing with noises and cheering as a boy fell in defeat. He was roughed up by this dude holding a spear. He called the poor guy Mr. Incompetent in the whole world, and the reason behind this happened 2 years ago at the Lamer Citadel's holy shrine. A girl was so excited to know what gift she would receive. She was friends with Kai Heinemann, who had been nervous all night and wondered what he would get. Rina turned while humming and continued imagining the gifts she wanted. Kai was sweating because this was the day he would receive the god's blessing, because in their world, when a human turns 13, a special ability would be gifted to them. There were many kinds of gifts, and they would decide their entire future. Rina revealed she wanted to become a princess and become a rabbit as her gift, but Kai presented her reality by saying it was impossible. She asked what he wanted, and he half-heartedly said a sword gift would be nice, but that was a lie. He didn't want a sword gift because his swordmaster grandfather wished to succeed him. Kai's wish was different. He wanted to be an adventurer and a hunter like his mom. Their role was to explore mysterious and unknown reaches of the world and defeat evil monsters because he knew he didn't have the talent with a sword. While he sulked for being the weakest among other disciples his age, Rina excitedly wondered if she could be a cat instead. He was telling her that being a cat wasn't a gift, but it was interrupted when the people gasped in shock. The two wondered if someone got a rare gift. A moment later, someone came running toward them. It was Layla Hellner, one of Kai's childhood friends. She greeted them with a smile, and when she caught her breath, she said she got the gift sword expert as she expected. She was also Kai's fiancée because their parents have fixed their marriage. A voice asked Kai if he would go up next. It was Keith and Roman beside him. Kai asked Roman what he got as a gift, but he silently placed his hand on his shoulder and pushed him away with a smug face. He leaned to Layla and told her he received the gift of Spear King, but she looked at him blankly and said she saw it because she had 2 eyes. Roman smirked and glanced at the men approaching them. They have this respected logo on their uniform. They are the Holy King's Order of Paladins. The man asked if they could talk to Leela because of her perseverance in training every day to hone her swordsmanship. He invited her to talk inside their military post nearby, making Kai realize Layla was excellent. Roman came along to escort her and gave a mocking smile at Kai. Layla waved goodbye to Rina and Kai, and when they left, Keith shyly apologized for Roman's rudeness. Kai said it was fine and told him not to fall behind. Keith nodded and said goodbye to them as he left. Rina called him because they had to stay in the line. After Rina touched the glowing crystal, the priest was surprised to see another swordmaster in their kingdom. 2 knights nearby couldn't believe this year's gift was all OP, making the knight wonder if this would mean that the demon's strength was also increasing and soon to attack them. The priest scolded him for his unnecessary remarks, so the knight apologized immediately. It was finally Kay's turn. The priest asked his name and told him to touch the crystal. The moment he touched it, the light coming from the crystal made his body feel heady, and the light from the crystal had disappeared. He was confused, wondering what happened. The priest looked confused as well, and when their eyes met, the old man raised his eyebrow and revealed that he was the most incompetent in the world. Going back to the present time, Roman kept on pressing Kai while calling him Mr. Most Incompetent. Even the people around them were mocking Kai, yet he still tried his best to fight Roman, but he was bonked in the forehead. He lost his balance and fell to the ground. Kai fainted, and when he opened his eyes, he saw birds in the sky. Suddenly, Lila came to him with a worried face. Kai's face was almost unrecognizable, so she helped him up out of pity, but Kai felt uncomfortable after seeing a bazooka pointed at him. She rubbed his forehead to alleviate the pain a little, but Kai had been so used to feeling pain since he got his gift. This had been his everyday routine because his physical abilities had declined significantly, and no matter how much he trained, he couldn't get stronger. Even total strangers would verbally abuse him and throw rocks. Layla and a few others were the only ones who treated Kai the same as before, even if his engagement was called off immediately after he got his gift. He lowered his head and told her not to worry because he was used to it. Layla asked if he would be going to the royal capital. He nodded because he believed if he went there, there would be a place where he would be treated like a person. Layla smiled softly and asked if he would be looking for a job there. Kai said he plans to go to the neighboring city, the neutral city of knowledge called Babel. It was home to a race without gifts. Kai was hoping that Trash Lycan would find a home there. He smiled at her and promised her he would send her letters when he settled there. She got up and hesitated to say something. She redirected the conversation and bid goodbye to him. When she left, Kai released a deep breath and decided to go visit his grandpa. Roman suddenly called him and exclaimed that he was the holder of the Spear King gift and the only one deserving of marrying Lila. Kai sighed and said it was something Lila should decide for herself. Roman raised his brow and thought he was being too confident that Lila would still choose him. When Kai said the depth of feeling for Lila was different from him, Roman cursed him. A man called him, telling him to stop wasting his time talking to a loser and continue his practice battles instead. Roman clicked a sound from his tongue and threatened Kai for the last time. When Kai arrived at his grandpa's house, he thanked him for everything. The old man apologized for all he had put him through. He scratched his head and said it was for his engagement with Lila being cancelled and that he was effectively chasing him out of the house. Kai said he didn't mind it because he had always seen Layla as his sister. He added that it was his dream to go to Babel. His grandpa looked at him for a second and started snickering until he burst out laughing. Kai was confused, so Grandpa said he could already see it in his eyes. He said good luck to his grandchild, making Kai think his old man saw straight through him, that he wanted to become a hunter over the dojo. His grandfather added that no matter what gift he possessed, he would always be his family. Kai was surprised to hear that he was welcome to return to their home. He shook his head and said he already knew he didn't belong there and doubted he would return. His grandfather shouted at him and told him just to let him see his face, and them every now and then. Kai was shaking and surrendered to him. The old man opened the door and said their conversation was now over. Kai was dumbfounded when he suddenly spoke calmly and told him to take good care of himself. Kai smiled and said yes. He got his bag ready and secured it for his journey. He was very optimistic about being a hunter and making his dreams come true in Babel. After a long walk, he was looking for the carriage station around the corner. He walked around and noticed a fancy carriage nearby. He wondered who owned it, and he was surprised when a girl called him by his full name. She introduced herself as Rosemary, which he thought was similar to the Amelia Kingdom's priestess. She said she would be accompanying him to the royal capital. She smiled and told him to call her Rose. He confusedly said okay, and when his eyes met the maid's gaze in a blink, she was already before his face. He jolted in fear, and sweat was starting to pour down when the maid threateningly called him Mr. Incompetent and asked if he had no manners. Rose told Anna, the maid, to get off him because she was the one who wanted to travel with him. Anna apologized immediately, and while Kai was still figuring out what was happening, Rose was huffing for air to calm down. Her butler tried talking, but his lady Rose shouted at him. She suddenly slapped both of her cheeks, which made Kai scream in shock. His jaw dropped upon seeing blood coming out from Rose's mouth. The lady switched to her bright character and said they should get going now. As he walked to the carriage, he wondered if all nobles were like this. He was grateful to know his grandfather had arranged this for him, but he was getting nervous being around these people. They stopped at a forest to rest. It was already time for dinner. The tents and food were already set, so Kai lined up for the food. He only got bread and water, which surprised him. The chef shooed him away and said it was Frankton's order. Kai had no choice but to walk away with it. He remembered that his grandpa had paid the travel expenses already, and little did he know, a soldier laid an eye on him and bumped into him. Kai's eyes widened as he fell. He groaned and gasped in shock, seeing his food and water go to waste. He glared at the soldier, but he was cursed for bumping against him. The soldier does this on purpose, just because of Kai's gift. Kai tried to say he was the one who bumped him, but the soldier kicked him. He stomped him and threw painful words at him. The other soldiers who saw it ignored them, but Anna stepped up to stop him. The soldier glared at her and asked if she was protecting this traitor. The maid said she only followed her lady's orders to treat him as a guest. A loud thud shook the ground. They turned and saw the huge famous sword held by a furious knight. When he asked what the ruckus was, the soldier looked away and acted as if he was only passing by to get some food. Kai sighed in relief. When he turned to thank Anna, she was already far from him, but she told him she only did it for Lady Rose's order. The knight passed by the maid and exchanged bowing heads. The knight walked to Kai and shyly apologized for the trouble caused by his men. Kai looked at Arnold in awe because he was now bowing in 90 degrees, begging him to forgive his negligence for not training his subordinates in proper attitudes. Kai panicked and told him to lift his head because he was already used to it in the royal capital. Arnold got up, smiling, and said he would bring him his food to his tent next time, but Kai refused immediately. Arnold told him to follow him, and he did. People were staring as they walked to the head chef. He looked straight into his eyes, and the chef started stuttering, saying he was only following orders. Arnold grabbed his collar and angrily told him to make Kai's mother-freaking food. The chef was in tears as he nodded. He immediately told his chefs to prepare a meal. It was a pile of food in a tray when it was served. Kai was worried he might now finish it and thanked Arnold for his help. The knight smiled and said kids like him should eat more to grow up nice and tall. He smiled and said he would be leaving. Leaving his Mr. Nice character, he now had to bestow chaos on Frankton and his subordinates for this incident. When he left, Kai was still amazed to meet people like him. 3 days had passed by in the Silk Great Forest, and he still gets this much food consistently. He was walking, and when a soldier was near him, his reflex made him jolt away from them. But they didn't attack him. It was night, and Kai wondered if Rina was doing alright as a sword saint in the hero's party to defeat the Demon King. He also thought of Keith because he went to the royal capital to study as an archmage. He suddenly heard Rose, so he let her in. They sat on the floor, and Kai noticed her gloomy aura. He was getting anxious because they might get the wrong idea if people saw them like this. Rose suddenly apologized to Kai. That shook the poop out of him. He almost farted and ruined the moment. She bowed and said he heard what happened from Arn. Kai told her she shouldn't be sorry. Her eyes became watery when she said she felt guilty for what he had gone through because she selfishly asked his grandfather to travel with him to the capital. Kai was confused as to why he asked his gramps, so he asked. She replied, saying it was because he was Rina and Keith's friend. He gasped in shock because she knew his childhood friends. Rose nodded and said she had the same magic mentor as Keith, and Rina was her best friend. He was in awe because she was learning under the head magician. He asked if they told her about him, and she said yes. Rina had always talked about him, so by now, Rose might know more about Kai than Keith. Kai felt embarrassed because Rina must have told her about his embarrassing moments in life. He asked if she knew if Rina was doing well in the heroes team. Rose nodded and said she still had that childlike personality, and the heroes and knights loved her. Kai was glad to hear the news because she was always a bit of a klutz, making him worried a little. A figure came close to the tent, and it was Anna. She was glaring at Kai, so he nervously told Rose Anna was there, emitting darkness. The maid suddenly smiled brightly and calmly told her lady that she should be sleeping by now. Rose got up and didn't realize her maid had been throwing stabbing gaze at Kai. The moon was at its brightest when they bid goodnights, and when they left, Kai sighed and headed in to sleep. But God had a different plan. Arnold came in, apologizing for barging in. Kai asked if he needed something, so the knight said he only wanted to thank him. Kai was surprised and dumbfounded. The knight bowed and said it was for talking with Lady Rose despite what happened because she really wanted to talk to him about it. Kai told him it was he who should be thankful for speaking to an incompetent one like him, but Arn cut him off and said he was also bestowed with a weak gift, and he empathized with him. Kai was surprised. The knight smirked and told him to do his best because if he worked hard, he would definitely be rewarded someday. While they were talking, someone within the great forest was talking. 2 mysterious men were waiting for Frankton to arrive, and when he got there, he removed his hood and asked the status of their plan. They explained that their elite squad surrounded them as they spoke. Frankton commended Enz, the supreme summoner, for his work. Enz asked the princess's whereabouts, and Frankton said she had talked with the incompetent traitor earlier and was now sleeping. All that was left for them was to cause a commotion to separate the knight captain Arnold from the princess' side. The man leaning on a tree, Signal, scoffed because Frankton was willing to sell out the royal he served just to make Prince Gilbert, the man he supports, the next claimant in line. Frankton glared at him, but Signal scoffed, said he must have phrased it wrong, and sarcastically apologized. Frankenstein exclaims that he knows nothing about their nation's internal matters, but Signal keeps pressing him by saying that it is the same as betraying his master. Enz was getting pissed by their argument, so he shouted at Signal to shut him out. He apologized to Frankton and said Signal had been on edge due to being in a foreign territory. Frankton figured he let himself get caught up in anger, so he shrugged it off to start their operation. Signal and Enz marched forward to go to their locations for their attack. Frankton was getting excited to get that princess out of their homeland with the help of these 6 commanders. He looked at the moon and swore his loyalty to Prince Gilbert. Kai couldn't sleep because he had to pee. He could have just done it near the tent, but I guess his social battery was drained, so he went to the forest. When he spotted a nice spot, a mysterious man walked there with his hand glowing. Kai's eyes widened bigger than a plate when their eyes met. He was drenched in sweat because of the nervousness and the pee that was about to burst. He tried asking if he lived around there, and the man placed his hand on his chin as he thought of what to say. He knew this guy wasn't on their report, so he wanted to play a little as long as it didn't interfere with the plan. Kai felt a shiver down his spine when the man told him to hurry up and run. When he snapped his finger, numerous monsters emerged from the shadows and started chasing him. Kai had no choice but to run through the forest darkness with a thumping heart while wondering who that demonic man was. He still couldn't understand why it was trying to kill him. As he ran, he could feel his chest, head, and legs about to burst in pain. He was crying hopelessly because he couldn't do anything with his weak body. Horrified hearing the monster's hungry growls behind him, he kept blaming the gift bestowed upon him for everything that had happened to him. He continued running even if he lost track of the campsite. He huffed for air, wishing to have a plain, modest life instead of getting killed by monsters in the middle of an empty forest. He noticed the fall at the end of the path. He stopped for a moment, wondering if this would be his end. He lifted his gaze and stared at the falling waters. He noticed something strange glowing behind the waterfall. When he heard the monster's footsteps getting closer, he sighed and looked ahead of him. He had no choice but to move forward and go behind the waterfall. When he went inside, he was welcomed by an empty sight. The place was endless, empty, yet peaceful. He looked around, looking for the forest he was just in, but it was nowhere to be found. Kai went silent. He sighed and started laughing as he slumped on the ground. He was just relieved he was alive. He noticed an abandoned building nearby, so he decided to get in the shade for a bit. When he got inside, he was again surprised to see the interior. He figured it was a temple because of its design. He noticed a stone table ahead of him, and near it was something engraved on it. He looked closer and wondered what it said. Since he thought it looked like a hand, he placed his hand against it. The table lighted up, and the magical circle at the center lit up in a snap. Magical dust transformed into a hologram, and he saw his name and his gift being classified as a divine tier gift. He wondered if it was a mistake, and when he saw the proceed button to the Trials of the Gods, he tapped it. The rules said he couldn't leave without finishing the game. He would also not age, gain infinite storage, escape shoes, indestructible sticks, and get a special appraisal skill. He realized this building was a dungeon and got frustrated because this place could only be cleared by a top-tier gift, and if he did clear it, he still had to face those monsters outside. He calmed his butt down and tried the item box. A holographic box appeared beside him that shook him, and he saw the shoes and stick. He became curious about the shoes because they might be an Air Jordan 13 bred. He tapped the escape shoes, and when it was pulled out of the storage, he was impressed it really appeared. He thought of storing it back, and it went back to the storage. He was amazed by the magic and tried using his appraisal skill on the shoe. It says that it would increase the possibility of fleeing from enemies, which was something he had never heard of before. He pondered if he could use this skill on himself and was surprised it worked. The truth about him having the lowest growth rate slapped him hard, but this confirms his gift was a divine tier, and he had the potential to exceed all limits in any category. He figured that the elixir mentioned earlier was somewhere in the room. He spotted the elixir spring at the corner, and he didn't expect it not in a bottle. He knew it was used for healing, and to test it out, he put a tiny laceration on his palm and placed it under the gushing elixir, and as expected, his wound was healed. He was so happy because he would be favored if he reported this to the Hunter Guild. He thought the heavens were now in his favor. Now that he had gathered all the tools, he was now ready to escape this place. He went inside the dungeon but had to keep calm after feeling the chills inside it. He told himself he could do this because adventuring is what he had been dreaming of. He was sliding his hand against the wall, and when he noticed a crossroad, his hand hung in the air. A horrifying sight greeted him. The huge monster bit him, piercing its sharp teeth through his skin. He screamed in pain as the monster devoured his arm. He continued screaming, hoping this was only a dream. He was so scared. He pulled his arm to run, but his flesh was dragged from its mouth. Kai desperately and hopelessly ran out of the dungeon, and when he saw the exit, he rushed towards the gushing elixir nearby. He lay there, submerging his face and arms. He closed his eyes, wondering how he got there. He reminded himself he was there to go to the royal capital, but he came across that red-haired monster upon traveling. He woke up and stood immediately. He huffed for air exhaustedly. He realized he was in the elixir spring and remembered his injured arm. He pulled it up and was surprised it was intact. He laughed as he lay down, thinking it wasn't a dream and what happened earlier was real. He looked at the door and realized he had to finish clearing this dungeon to get out of there, but when a memory of getting eaten by a monster flashed, his eyes widened and he screamed in fear. Is this PTSD? He cursed as he cried, but he still managed to get through a week inside there. He was frustrated because he was starving to death. The only edible thing was this worm. He learned it was poisonous when he picked it up and used appraisal skills. He sighed in dismay because he would die if he ate this as well. On day 15, he managed to get through the days by drinking elixirs. He groaned, getting frustrated by his hunger. He picked up the worm and decided to eat it. Once he gulped it down, a stinging pain stuck him. His vision turned red, and we won't be able to tell in these black and white panels. Anyways, Kai thought he was about to perish, but a skill for poison resistance popped out. He was surprised to be alive, so he read the conditions to acquire the lesser poison resistance in the hologram. He looked like a zombie by now, and he was feeling dizzy and pain in the head. He figured elixir would help it, and as expected, it did. Kai wouldn't have to worry about food now because he would be eating bugs from now on. 100 days of the same routine with the bug eating included had passed, and he finally got poison resistance skills. He was so happy, but that vanished when he realized he would have a bug-only diet for life. A year had passed, and Kai was now focusing on his swordsmanship to clear up his mind. He was keeping track of the days by marking the bricks. In his golden 40 years there, his skills had gone up despite all of his stats being naturally lower due to his gift. He learned he was good at imagination and summoned Roman's clone to practice. The fear was still in him when fighting him, but he had changed. Kai realized his great improvement, so he gained confidence and managed to flip Roman's spear off his hand. Kai swings his arm, and Roman doesn't know what to do anymore. He lost balance from trying to evade it, but Kai finally defeated this mother-father bully. He sighed as he turned his back to Roman. His swordsmanship, as was his imagination, was getting better because he even defeated his master in his mind. Thanks to this, Kai must meet the conditions to acquire the Harry of Swordsmanship by practicing it for 120 years. He sighed and followed the instructions as he figured his imaginary battles counted. 800 years passed by, and he was now battling against the heroes of their nation. Like the master swordsman called Dual-Wielding Arm, the strongest magician Silver, and the former sword emperor of an empire called Ashburn. He fought against them within the 1,500 years of his life. Those heroes were no match against him now, even if they all attacked Kai at once. This day it was 3,000 years since the game started, and the only one left who could face him, the strongest swordsman in this world who surpassed all sword saints, was himself, Kai Heinemann. He imagined himself fighting against him, and it would be good to see him move from a different perspective and pin down his weak points to improve and get stronger. Kai finally went inside the dungeon and used his appraisal skill on that grasshopper who bit him. But aside from his name as Batman, everything else was unknown. He smirked because this mysterious thing made things interesting. He put his guard up when the monster charged towards him, but Kai was surprised it was moving slower than he expected and straight forward. He smirked as he slapped his face with his weapon, making the monster glare at him. It lifted its thick legs. I wonder whose trainer he was under? This thigh would be a chick magnet. Kai used his stick to block it, and realizing how pitiful it was against him made him sigh. When the grasshopper attacked him again, he looked up, but it was a waste of time. He decided to use his first form, the Brink of Death technique, and in a blink, the weapon pierced through his body, slicing the monster in half. He swung his sword to shred its body into chunks, and when the monster was finally defeated, he was disappointed. He was about to walk away when his hologram showed his physical abilities had increased. He looked around and continued fighting monsters inside the dungeon for hours, but wasn't satisfied because they all crumbled to pieces at a mere touch. He managed to get to the deepest chamber, but the place only got wider as he descended. He was also running out of toxic bugs. He wondered if he should get back to the surface with this teleportation magic circle, but after a long thought, he decided to eat the monsters before him. It was disgusting, yet his hunger was alleviated. He went down the stairs after eating, and when he lifted his gaze, he was surprised to see a promising killer hornet. It was a huge monster, and it started buzzing angrily at him. Kai smiled in excitement because he was growing bored and was glad to find a worthy opponent. When he smiled and was about to talk, the monster was gone where he saw it last. He felt the pain crawling through his system because, in just a split second, his arm was pierced through by something. He gasped after seeing it. He smirked as he was impressed. Despite the wound, he smiled and thought this fight would be worth savoring every second. He turned around and spotted the hornet. When it started moving, he tried his best to follow it and managed to dodge its next attack. Kai sighed because it may have been a fast attack, but it could only have been an attack in a straight line. It stayed still again, like telling him to dodge his attack, but it did not charge forward this time. The killer hornet's butt opened and released something liquid. It was not diarrhea, but Kai suspected it was poison. He lifted his weapon to use his third form. He activated the moon mirror. This technique was able to control the poison around his weapon. He smirked and told the monster he would return this favor back to him. He blasted the poison back to the hornet, and it covered the monster, burning its skin and flesh slowly. It was growling in pain. The corrosive poison was putting an end to its life, but the monster got up in anger. Kai smiled because the killer hornet carried a warrior's pride for still coming at him. He took a deep breath for his second form, called the lightning strike. With this technique, Kai stabbed the monster with his dull weapon through the hornet's body in a blink. Kai responded to him as a fellow warrior with his fastest sword technique. It fell down, defeated as Kai walked away. When the death of the killer hornet was verified, a reward was given to him. Kai was surprised to see a worn-out box pop before him. He opened it, and the flame sword Flamberge appeared. It employs ambient magic to ignite targets it slashes. He was impressed reading it as he poured the elixir into his wound. The sword teleported to his waist, making him sigh because his indestructible stick was enough. However, his eyes sparkled when he realized the sword could make fire and roast those bugs. He skipped his way down to the next floor, and when he got there, the atmosphere was hot and burning. The floor was steaming hot as it was a lava field. Kai thought about it for a moment, but he became so excited about this challenge. He was so happy about it that thought he couldn't get through this without heat-resistant shoes. He pulled the ends of his pants up and opened his item box to store back the escape shoes. He walked barefoot, and after feeling confident for a second, he started screaming and dancing in cha-cha. He pulled out his elixir to recover. With this, he could withstand the heat for about 10 seconds. He could gain heat resistance skills if he were exposed to high heat 50 times. He chuckled as he poured elixir to his feet to push through the heat to acquire it. Once finishing the 50, he got the skill after finishing floors 11 to floor 250. All sorts of elements were present on the floors, so by now, he could breathe underwater and be the next avatar. Around floor 300, he acquired so much resistance to many elements, and he could be immortal at this point. He sighed as he wiped his sweat. He walked to the next floor and realized he had been using the Thunder Beast gloves he had acquired as a towel. He marched down and noticed a monster standing on a platform, growling at him. It was the Thunder Tiger King, and this was his final trial of the upper levels. Kai remained calm when the monster charged towards him, but in a swift, before it could land its claws on him, he swung his weapon at the monster, cutting its body into small pieces. He sighed in disappointment, but when he heard the voice verifying that the Thunder Tiger King was defeated, he got confused about why its voice changed. He looked around and noticed some big fish below. He stared at the big monsters below and grinned like a maniac. He immediately jumped off the platform and splashed through the water. Monsters instantly surrounded him. It was indeed huge, as if it was bigger than a whale shark. One monster noticed the foreign creature inside their territory, so Kai was alerted. When it attacked him with its mouth wide open, he smirked and was devoured by the darkness. A moment later, Kai emerged from the water. He gasped for air because he had just finished defeating all the monsters lurking below the water. It was his first underwater battle, and he got a bit tangled up there, but he was worried about how he would return to the platform now. The announcer was stuttering in disbelief as it announced the floor was cleared and he would get rewards for it. Kai noticed its stuttering voice, but the announcer told him to shut up. The two boxes before him looked rare, so he opened the small one first. It stores a mysterious book with unique engravings. He wondered what he would do with this magic tome when he couldn't even use magic. He put it in his storage and opened the other box containing a sword. He used his appraisal skill on it and learned it was the legendary Reikiri, a twin blade. He stared at its beauty, and the feeling of it on his hand felt so natural, like it was made for him. He smiled because it was similar to his wooden swords, so this would be his new partner. Stacks of decades had passed since the game had started. He was now facing these dangerous monsters in the Dragon Zone. After continued training, he thought of training now with his Reikiri sword. He was dancing with his sword, and each slash was piercing through the dragon's scale like butter. He never thought of possessing such an incredible weapon that would harmonize with his swordsmanship. Around floor 350, he met another dragon who looked like Frieza. Kai noticed this dragon was quite small compared to those he defeated before. Its eyes exuded immense pressure. For his 8th trial, he must defeat this golden dragon, Fafnir. The announcer even cheered on Faf, making Kai sigh for its obvious biases. He drew his Reikiri again and rushed towards the dragon to have a soul-boiling duel to the grave. The battle was almost equal, but Kai still won as expected. He was shivering in exhaustion, drenched in his blood. He grabbed onto his stick to keep his balance as he chuckled. He bursts out laughing while his blood spurts out from his mouth. He dropped to the floor, weak and still bleeding endlessly. The dragon did not only lose, but Kai did as well. He couldn't believe this dragon would nullify his slashes. He went back to the ground floor to plan his next goal. He soaked himself in the elixir and watched his flesh regenerate. He sighed because he was getting exhausted by this routine, but he had to push through to get out. He closed his eyes, wondering what he would do since his physical attacks wouldn't grant him an easy victory. He thought of the magic book he got, so he opened his item box and tapped the search bar to find the magic tome. He opened the first page and learned he had to place his hand on the page to make a contract to acquire magic. However, due to his incompetent gift, he failed. He had no choice but to read the original text directly to acquire it. He drank his elixir, wiped his mouth, and noticed the hologram beside him. He had been sitting down, reading books about the poison's side effects. 60 years later, he was still reading books and hadn't gone to the dungeon ever since. He was starting to understand magic through reading this book. It was classified into attributes, and for general attributes, it needs innate talent unrelated to gifts. Without talent, it would have been impossible to contract magic, but there is non-attribute magic, where one could use magical energy to use its power. Kai was glad because he found a way how to acquire magic, and more years of learning continued. He was going through medical literature, where he learned cells of the body turn into tissue that forms organs necessary for life, just like non-attribute magic. It would be possible to use a true long-range, pseudo-remote magic technique. He waited for a monster to be resurrected to be its practice dummy for his newly acquired magic. When the monster blew fire at him, he stood firmly as he lifted his arm. He activated his non-attribute magic and used his adamantine strength. In a blink, his power was released, and his arm was still intact despite the level of pressure he released. He drew his sword, and it covered his aura. He reinforced his magic to his weapon to activate the demonic armament, and this Reikuri's blade has a magical blade that even physical immunity couldn't stop. He apologized to the dragon for experimenting on him with the blade he prepared for Fafnir. The dragon growled as he tried to accumulate more magic power in its mouth. Simultaneously, Kai released his attack, and his eyes widened in surprise. His perfected attack turned its upper half to dust. He used his exploration magic to see the monster's location within a 500-meter radius. There were 2 new monsters behind the wall, and Kai thought it would be a waste to use the demonic armament on them, so he advanced with these stones instead. He had been practicing his throws for years, and he had mastered them. He figured it was about time to enter the next floor. He walked down the stairs to face Fafnir with all of the techniques, skills, and magic attributes he learned. The announcer was surprised he came to challenge his Fafnir, but Kai smirked and said they should just watch him defeat their pet. The dragon glared at him, and its gaze made him smirk because he had been longing for this day to witness fresh blood spraying from the monster's neck. He had become obsessed with defeating this dragon, so he was grinning crazily as he released the skill he had been honing for all those years. The attack slashed through, but the dragon was able to dodge it on time. The attack damaged the place for a long time, so Kai proudly told Fafnir to look at his technique, which was dedicated to him. He asked if he could feel the racing heartbeat of excitement inside him just to see his flesh torn apart. He yearned for Fafnir so much that he dreamed endlessly about the reunion, and when he grinned and told the dragon to fight him now with honor, the dragon bowed its head and surrendered to him. Kai went silent, trying to process what the dragon said. After a few seconds, he screamed in frustration, saying there must be a mistake because they hadn't even started fighting and used the techniques he had prepared just for this day. But I guess just by looking at this human, the dragon felt as if it had gone cuckoo. Kai screamed at the dragon for crying and curling on the side. He cursed because the golden dragon was officially declared defeated, and the voice sarcastically congratulated Kai. He refused to win without a fight, so he threw a tantrum. He was given a special reward, and a hologram popped, saying the golden dragon wanted to join his party. Kai looked at Fafnir, and the dragon jolted in shock. He wondered if this crying dragon really wanted to be at his party. He thought it might be all right for the dragon to accompany him because it looked like it understood human language. He sighed after realizing that the voice he had been hearing had become comforting to him after being all alone. He accepted the dragon, and Fafnir suddenly glowed. He noticed it was shrinking, adjusting its size and form, and in a blink, a human figure was left. Fafnir was a loli. She looked so cute while she greeted her master. He stared blankly at her as he didn't expect the dragon to be like this. Ah yes, the stereotypical dragon loli is actually legal because it is over 100,000 years old. It's just what this manga needed. After defeating Fafnir, Kai got these clothes. He put on his inner cloak, pants, and boots made out of the legendary dragon's parts. He was grateful to have a full set of clothes after so many years. Fafnir called him and asked if she should burn his old, trashy clothes, but he stopped her and said those were the ones who witnessed all his sufferings and training. He put it in his item box and put a star on it to avoid accidental disposal, making Fafnir sigh and tell him never to take it out again. They went to the first floor to show Fafnir the small house Kai built with the materials from the labyrinth. Fafnir froze when her stomach started growling in hunger. Kai told her not to worry because this marbled beef would be served later on. He kept talking about how delicious it would be, making her say the long build-up would make her snap. She may be cute, but she has a terrible attitude and tone. Kai pulled out his flame sword, which he had been using for cooking. He used his own sword-style secret move, and the technique made Fafnir drop her mouth open. After a few minutes, the meat was perfectly grilled, which he practiced for 10 years. Fafnir was drooling in hunger, and while he blabbed about how he seasoned it, got those seasonings, and cooked it, Fafnir had gone deaf, too focused on devouring the meat. She finished eating the meat and started trying to eat the flavors on Kai's hand. He screamed, telling her to stop, so he had no choice but to cook more for her. The little Fafnir was so happy with the stacks of meat surrounding her. Kai took a bite after drinking the elixir to prevent intoxication or side effects from the monster's meat, but Fafnir straight up ate the meat. They ate together, and Kai noticed the meal felt unbelievably delicious when he ate it with someone. It was a strange feeling that he never felt for years, and it was like the obsession and anxiety over the power that had dominated him up to this point melted away like shadows at sunset. The thirst for blood was no longer visible when he faced her radiant smile. Since they are at a party, they could now have a mutually beneficial relationship. After every meal, they head deeper into the dungeon years. It had already been 13,000 years since the game started, and Kai was now on 400 floors. Fafnir said the monster looked like an elephant in a monkey body. The monster suddenly laughed at them, commending them for reaching this floor. It introduced itself as Jurimakala, a god of evil. Fafnir went silent, looking at it. She suddenly handed the stick to him, making him wonder if she was done with the steak. She said she would still eat it and pulled out Thanos' gauntlet. Fafnir grinned devilishly and said she would beat this monster to a pulp, making Kai stop her because she was too violent. She sighed because she obviously took after him. Kai decided to step up to set an example. He pointed at Jurimakala with the barbecue stick and told him to surrender now, and if he did, he would let him go. The monster was dumbfounded. Kai sighed and said he really didn't like killing, so he would spare him if he would not hurt him. The monster was furious. His ego was stepped and trampled upon because a mere rat looked down on the first vassal of Mara, the highest rank among the gods. Kai remained silent as the monster said all of his credentials, but when his ears felt like they were about to bleed from all the noise, he released a thunderous strike at him, and that attack lit its body. Kai slowly returned his blade to its sheath, sighing because the monster was so annoyingly giving a long speech for his refusal. Fafnir walked to him in awe. She called her master and commended his instant annihilation. She thought her master was teaching her to beat every opponent into oblivion like that, but Kai tried denying and explaining it. The conversation was interrupted when Kai received a subjugation encyclopedia that allowed him to summon the souls of the monsters he defeated. While looking at it, a hologram materialized before them, asking him if he would like to save Jurimakala's soul in the book. They were looking at it, and Kai was considering if it would be the best thing to do. But before he could decide, Fafnir tapped yes. He scolded her, but she explained she only wanted to press a button. But I guess it was Kai being pressed in anger. The book levitated, and a page contains Jurimakala's information and selfie. He closed the book as he thought of saving every monster, starting from the first floor. They went to the house at the ground level to scan the encyclopedia, and Kai thought of trying to summon that noisy elephant earlier. Fafnir remembered it was the monster he annihilated, but he told her not to say that word so easily. Kai stood up and summoned a magic circle at the center to release the soul of Jurimakala. The magical circle was covered with pecks of magic dust, and after a few seconds of waiting, the center lit up blindingly. The monster woke up in confusion. He looked around and noticed the familiar walls and ceiling, but sweat started pouring down when he spotted the one who killed him. The two pointed at him, saying Kai would be his master from now on, but Jurimakala refused in anger. Kai sighed from his disobedience and had no choice but to summon his indestructible stick. He grinned, tapping his palm with the stick, and said he would train him endlessly until he becomes obedient. More years had passed, and Jurimakala was in deep sleep at the moment. Suddenly, he heard Kai screaming and telling him to wake up. He jumped and saluted while greeting him good morning. Kai greeted him back, but with a smash on the face for being too slow with his response. He scolded him because he should have greeted him before he did. The monster was trembling as he apologized on his knees, saying he was nothing more than a worthless bug crawling on the ground. This made Kai ask if this bug considered itself greater than his master. The worthless bug firmly denied it and quickly greeted Fafnir with a good morning upon seeing her, adding again that he was a worthless bug. Kai smashed his face again for being slow and using that language in front of Faf. She greeted her worthless bug master with a salute, and Kai got annoyed because they were now a troop of worthless bugs. He ordered the monster to do 500,000 push-ups, and after a whole hour of rapid push-ups, Jurimakala's arms were feeling sluggish. Kai commended his work while putting on his gear and preparing to fill the encyclopedia. He was also testing this item out, called the Divine Seal Gloves, that could tone down his abilities at will. He added that his stats would increase if he was beaten to near death and still won. The two laughed, and their insanity was very visible to Jurimakala. Kai reminded him to clean the house and stock up properly because Fafnir still eats like a huge dragon. The same routine went on, and they reached the floor 700. It was all plain field with a bloody red sky. Fafnir was so amazed by the beauty of this terrifying place when they noticed something burning nearby. A creature was sleeping peacefully while his feathers released fires. The bird opened its eyes because he didn't recognize this boy's face. Meanwhile, Kai was getting worried because he couldn't gauge the enemy's strength with his lowered stats. He could tell this monster was strong just by its look, so he wondered if he should take off his gloves and forget about gaining XP. He asked what his insane daughter thought. Fafnir stared for a moment, and when she started drooling, she said it looked delicious. Kai sighed and tried explaining what he meant by saying that he thinks of the monster as an enemy, but she kept asking if they would be roasting it. At the same time, he was scolding her for being too greedy as a lady. The monster wondered what they were talking about, but when he heard them calling him a bird freak, he clucked at them like an angry chicken. Kai explained it was only a figure of speech about him as a food ingredient, but that only made the divine phoenix mad. It told them he would never forgive them, so Fafnir took her Korna, a dragon iron armor. She told her master she would deal with it, but Kai knew she just wanted to eat the bird. The voice in the dungeon sighed, getting tired of his endless battles. The phoenix glared at them for daring to challenge him, paying them back with his purging flames for their blasphemy. When the flame neared Faf, she punched it and told him not to underestimate the Korna weapon. Fafnir sprung to the air and activated her cataclysmic upheaval. She released the lion's sky slash through the monster's flesh, making its blood splash out of its wounded body. She managed to slice the upper body in half but wasn't satisfied. She twirled around to build up momentum for another blow. She screamed and punched straight through the monster's body until it was cut in half, ready to be roasted. She flipped her body with a proud smile to prepare for landing. She landed with her Kornov smashing the ground, making her master clap and commend her for correctly saying the special move's name this time. Fafnir lifted her sparkling face, telling him it was time to cook. Kai chuckled as he took out his flaming sword, but they were surprised by the sudden explosion behind them. The monster's flesh was burning, making her think it was making itself tastier, but when they noticed it was regenerating, Fafnir got frustrated because she was getting hungry. The phoenix was angrily glaring at them as he said he was an immortal bird god that governs life and death. Faf frowned and was about to attack the chicken, but her master stopped her. He chuckled devilishly as he took his sword out. His blood was boiling in excitement against an immortal because it had been a while since he felt this thrill. His insanity was eating him up again as he described how he would pull out and dice its organs while it was still alive, then use his Reikuri to incinerate it. He wondered how long this phoenix would resurrect, but Faf worriedly reminded her master his little girl was watching. Kai dropped his sword a moment later, shaking and sweating in disbelief. He couldn't believe this was happening because it perished when he diced the monster. Fafnir was drooling upon seeing it, but Kai was devastated and disappointed as he cooked its meat with his sword. After cooking it, he still hadn't moved on, and when a hologram asked if he would like to add its poor dice soul to his book, he punched it. He angrily cursed because the gutless, pathetic bird bragged about being immortal, so he expected to fight him for at least 10 years, but he perished so easily. Fafnir paused, eating, looking at him. Kai gulped as he realized he was having a bad influence on the child, so he chuckled, saying he was only showing her what she should not do. He reminded her not to do those things because she is a lady. Fafnir nodded and said she understood her crappy master. When he realized he was called a crappy master, he just kept it together to prevent showing his insanity again. He patted her head and smiled. This is indeed the classic pattern of bad parenting. Fafnir may look all cute, but she is still a dragon. She had been holding on to those words someone told her, so she stayed in the dungeon for many years to guard it. She waited, hoping someone would come to challenge her, and that moment came when her master arrived. When she saw his attack that pierced through the wall that was supposed to be impossible to break, she was terrified but remembered that she was told to follow the person who would come to set her free. From that moment, she followed her master and realized her master wasn't that scary, but a kind one and a good cook. After being with him, she smiled much more and adored her master deeply. They ventured, trained, read books, and even slept side by side. They were inseparable. It was another day, and Fafnir was enjoying every bit of her master's food. Kai rubbed her hair and thanked her for appreciating his food. When they finished eating and cleaning up, they went out and saw Jiro Mikala and the others on their knees to greet them. He introduced 2 new retainers to their worthless bug army. Kai welcomed them, so the monsters told them to stay safe in the dungeon with full energy. Kai nodded and told them to get the dinner ingredients and bathroom ready before they got home. Faf smiled, glad because seeing him being honored makes her feel proud as well. The two went inside the dungeon, and a monster met the heavens after Kai's one-hit victory. Fafnir rushed to her to congratulate him, but she went silent when she noticed his expression. She worriedly called him, waking him up, but he talked to her again like nothing had happened. Fafnir started noticing this just like that one night when she woke up to use the bathroom. Fear almost ate her alive when her master wasn't beside her. She got up crying because she thought her master left her behind, and she would be alone again. She searched around and heard him calling Layla nearby. She looked outside and saw him leaning against the railing. His face was blank and had that same lonely expression he had been hiding. Pfaff watched silently from the window in pain because Kai kept calling someone's name that wasn't in the labyrinth. She feared he might leave her, so she opened the door. Kai looked at her and was surprised to see her eyes all swollen up in tears. She was sobbing as she ran to him to hug him. He hugged her, asking if she had a bad dream, but she was just crying. He decided to assist her in getting back to bed. When she calmed down, she called him, asking if he would always stay with her. Kai smiled and nodded, but Pfaff repeatedly asked if he would be leaving her, and he continued to assure her he wouldn't leave her. He added that he never lied to her, just like how he had been teaching her. He asked her if she had ever lied to him, and she said lying was bad. He smiled and reminded her he had only ever told her the truth while reaching to her pinky to make a promise. Fafnir was getting sleepy, and the last words she repeatedly said was she loved her master. That made her so happy and relieved, but she still hoped this happiness would last forever. The trial of the gods was finally cleared, and Kai was now leaving it. Fafnir and some man also came along with him. Kai's memories were still intact, and the cold breeze welcomed him back. He recalled his journey to the royal capital, and was pursued by a mysterious black beast before stumbling into this dungeon. He grew as a person and adventurer inside it by fighting countless monsters and forming bonds before managing to escape it. He looked up in the dark sky, noticing he really didn't age. Fafnir noticed her master was acting weird, so Astaroth, the former final boss, told her it was normal since their master had just returned to his original world. Bro was just stuck in the dungeon for so long that he forgot what this was all about. You may be wondering how the final boss followed him. When Kai reached the final floor, his insanity showed a thirst for a bloodbath, but upon seeing his unbelievable status, the cowardly Demon King surrendered. Fafnir noticed someone was coming in their direction. A few seconds later, a red-haired guy appeared, asking if he was done running away. Kai remembered how he interrupted her pee and how strong he looked that day, but upon looking now, he looked weak and emo. The guy mockingly said his bodyguards were a total knockout. The two demons got pissed and were about to attack the human, but their master stopped them. Lucky for him, Kai put on his gloves to hold back his strength, but when the red-haired guy heard it, he got angry and started telling him he was an idiot. Before he could finish it, Kai sliced through time and broke her fingers in different directions. He screamed in pain and ordered his monsters to attack them. The dark wolves charged at them with their fangs showing. Kai swiftly ended them with his true style of swordsmanship sword technique. The guy started shivering in fear, but Kai continued slaughtering the monsters with his first form. The Astaroth knew it would happen, while Fafnir cheered for her master. The red-haired man was wearing the insignia of the Empire's Summoner Corps, so Kai questioned him and learned that a noble from Amelia's kingdom named Fraction plotted his kidnapping with others to get the first princess. They even hired strong, well-known people for this, making him feel compelled to protect Princess Rose. While he was wondering if he could fight against the real Sword Emperor, Astaroth knew that excited look, which thirsted for a fight. Their master opened the Subjugation Encyclopedia to order the hundreds of grasshopper men to target summoners wearing black robes and the other monsters nearby. The Demon King couldn't believe his eyes and couldn't see the number of grasshoppers he tamed. He granted these monsters freedom to go on a rampage, targeting those men in cloaks. One by one, they bit them, but their noise alerted the campsite. Anna looked outside and announced the attack to the knights. The maid informed the princess that the Empire was attacking them and suggested that they escape immediately, but most of the soldiers were defeated when they got out. Rose couldn't believe Lord Fraction betrayed his homeland for this. She gasped upon realizing her brother might be behind all this. Fraction explained that if Rose married the prince in the Empire, Prince Gilbert would ascend to the throne in Amelia's kingdom. He told them it was all for the sake of their country, but Rose called him a traitor for harming the people. Arnold suddenly came out, saying he wouldn't allow it. Rose and Anna were relieved to see the captain of the knights defend them. Arnold apologized for the delay and charged towards Fraction with his hell of a think blade. The old man screamed in fear, but a clang of blades was heard. Zigner caught his sword. Knowing how strong Arn was, he thought fighting the kingdom's strongest swordsman would be worth it. He challenged him to have a soul-breaking duel to death. Arnold realized this man was the Empire's Sword Emperor and accepted it. It was a battle of the best sworders in two kingdoms, and they were surprised they were evenly matched. However, a snake managed to crawl up to Arn's arm. It hissed was about to pierce its venomous fangs. Zigner angrily called Enz and scolded him for interfering in their duel. Enz explained he did not intend to indulge in his pointless hobby, making Zigner think he was looking down on swordsmanship. While they were arguing, Arnold gritted his teeth in frustration. He gave Anna a nod to send a signal, and she understood what he meant. While Anna whispered to the princess they would run to the forest while Arnold held these punks, They didn't notice the person behind her. A soldier from the Empire grabbed Anna to keep them from escaping. She cursed them as she was passed to a grinning man who had a long forehead. Ens told him to take that maid and do as they please. The man grinned devilishly as he pulled Anna away from the princess. Rose screamed worriedly, while Ens told Fraction to leave the princess's restraint to him. Zigner followed him, still not done arguing. The princess watched everything unfold. She was losing hope and just wished someone would save them. She cried for help, and in a blink, the man sitting on top of Anna had his head rotated multiple times. Kai sneaked behind another soldier to slap him, but its head fell off like it was a mascot. Rose stared at the bodiless head in confusion. She saw Kai on the side and couldn't believe it was the most incompetent in the world that had saved her life. In this world, where humans could have gifts as a blessing, what Kai Hyman received wasn't a blessing to him, but was a curse for Kai. Despite the weak gift, he pursued strength even if it cost him his life. He handed his hand to the princess to help her, but suddenly they heard some men rushing to them. They were said being chased by a monster, but it was just the little girl playing bowling with her fist as the ball. Kai's followers walked back to him to surrender the mastermind. The princess was still observing him because she had heard from Rina, her best friend, that Kai was weak and innocent looking, but it was hard to believe now. Rose remembered Anna and Arnold and saw them being attacked by transparent slime. What a lucky slime! Lord, make me a slime right now, and I am willing to heal Anna's wounds anytime for free. They panicked about the slime, but Kai told them it was a healing slime to help them. Arnold nodded and realized his numbness had gone away. Anna and the soldiers' wounds were gone, and they got their strengths back. Kai smiled, looking at them, and patted the slimes as they returned to the book. Arn was wondering if Kai could summon monsters. Faf got jealous upon seeing her master petting the slime, so she threw a little tantrum. Kai chuckled and patted their heads as well, but suddenly Enz's voice lingered, telling Fraction he couldn't even capture one woman with his power. Zigner sighed and thought they should have handled this on their own. The Sword Emperor noticed Kai having a sword around him, so he excitedly challenged him. Kai sighed because this bug was trying to dig his own grave. Zigner warned Enz not to interfere and got to his fighting stance, which to Kai was disappointing. When the princess tried to stop Kai, Arnold held her off because it would be too dangerous. Kai picked up a stick nearby because he knew this guy wasn't worth pointing his blade at. When Zigner heard it, his temper snapped, and he jumped straight at him with his blade, which looked like he suffered from dryness and ended up with split ends. Kai caught his attack with the stick, and Zigner continued putting his weight on his sword. He groaned when the power colliding threw them away. Kai's performance amazed Anna and Rose. They asked Arnold why the Sword Emperor's attacks wouldn't touch Kai, and he explained it was because their skills were worlds apart. They figured Kai looked like he had trained for millennia, and Zigner was a novice. Arnold was certain it wasn't talent, but this was a result of Kai's relentless training. Zigner was so frustrated by their duel that he started shaking in disbelief when a nobody using a useless stick flipped off his sword from his palm. Kai told him he may have talent, but reminded him to think about why the Sword Emperor title was passed to him. Zigner fell on his knee, defeated, and was told to return to the Empire, for he had been spared. En sighed, turned his back to the crying Sword Emperor, and faced Kai. He was furious because Kai might become a threat to their empire. Flames were released from him as he summoned the Spirit King Ifri to end Kai's life. This old man might be the Monkey King's ancestor. The spirit emerged from the ground while Enz told Ifri to consume the mana of his subordinates if he must. The flames from him were getting out of hand, and Ifri was starting to steal the mana from the soldiers. The poor soldiers screamed as the flames devoured them, but Kai calmly said these wouldn't hurt him. He called Juramikala the most obedient, fearful, loyal, and tortured subordinate of Kai. When Juramikala came out, Ifri's eyes widened by its size. Juramikala growled, which echoed through the area. He suddenly changed to his kind voice to thank his master for summoning him once more. Kai nodded and ordered him to educate Ifri. Juramikala easily grabbed its hair filled with lice while chuckling devilishly. Enz noticed he was up next when that was being taken care of, so he begged Kai to join their empire instead. Before he could finish his statement, his body was sliced in half. Kai took a deep breath, said he wouldn't need their empire, and used their subordinates as bait. He sighed as he called Faf and Astaroth to start moving, but Fraction wasn't done. He asked Kai to serve under Prince Gilbert because, with his power, the prince would ensure he would live in absolute comfort. Kai halted and glanced blankly at him because he could even rule the whole world if he wanted. When he said their family was pests who discriminate against people based on gifts and lineage, Anna, the servant of that said family, drew a weapon for his blasphemy. The princess of their land stopped them, making Anna worriedly wonder, Rose told her it was fine because, for the first time, she had met someone who shared her views. She believed citizens could participate in governance instead of relying on royalties. She wanted to build a world where people would be more accepting and loving. Rose had decided. She faces Kai and appoints him as her royal guard. This would be acceptable since Kai lives under her governance as a royal member and future queen. Anna gasped in shock because she was appointing a commoner as the royal heir. Rose explained there were only a few left that she trusted in their country, and she had no doubts about giving her belief to Kai. She lifted her hand and said if he would accept being her royal guard, he would have to kiss her hand. She smiled as she waited for his response, and he took a few seconds to take her hand. She said that until she found a proper royal guard, he would humor this charade of hers. Rose's cheeks turned red from happiness, and they happily agreed to it. Astaroth sighed because their master always encountered troubles, but Kai only accepted it as an opportunity to find stronger opponents through the princess. The princess was now writing down a letter to Rina. She said they were heading to Ball City to hand over Fraction, and that she would entrust this letter to Arnold. She had expected Rina would be shocked about the princess being attacked by a lord, but thanks to Rina's childhood friend, Kai, he drove all the imperial soldiers away. She wrote down how Kai was accompanying her as they stayed in the town of Papla. The king had ordered them to stay there for a few weeks until Baltz was confirmed safe for the princess. She was glad he accepted this role because if not, they had no choice but to appoint Rina, making him wonder if he felt compelled to protect her because she was friends with Rina. Since they cherished Rina, they agreed not to send her to this mission because of the danger it could impose on her. When Kai was about to get up, the princess asked him for a favor. Meanwhile, the demons were sleeping, and they needed a bedtime ritual of capping Faf's horns with tennis balls before somebody lost an eye. Wait, hold on. Is that Big Bazooka's Astaroth's? He was a girl? When Kai arrived, he opened the door and woke his subordinates. Astaroth was startled and got up anxiously. Kai said they would be heading out to shop, but when the blanket covering her fell on the floor, it revealed her mountains and peach. He screamed in shock, waking Fafnir and her pet she had taken from somewhere. She greeted them while yawning. The princess and Anna greeted her back and wondered what the noise was. Rose brushed Faf's hair as she asked them to look for ingredients to make a cake with Kai. The little girl gasped in excitement for the cake. Kai summoned Nemia to protect the princess while he was gone. When the three were off to shop in the city, Faf excitedly waved at them. Anna sighed, wondering if those three would be all right, but Rose knew they were serious and trustworthy persons, even if they looked chaotic. A vast silk forest surrounded the city, and hunters from around the world passed there to trade. It was a place of freedom where persecuted beast folk gathered, just like what he heard from his mother's stories. He was glad he was able to witness the beauty of the town and its people, and even thought of registering as a hunter. He halted when a group of people gathered around in one place. They walked to the crowd, but Fafnir panicked as she looked for the missing dog named Fen. An old man got to his knee to hand the finest pepla fruit they prepared just for him. One of his men lifted his arm and used his magic secretly, with his lord aware of this. Astaroth noticed it and said the magic purposely rots the fruit. When the nobleman took a bite, he screamed when he noticed the look of the apple. He slammed it to the floor and said it was rotten. Lord Getty exclaimed that he was tasked to select offerings for Prince Gilbert, and feeding him a rotten fruit was the same as giving it to His Highness. The old man started shaking in fear and said there was a mistake. The nobleman ordered his men to execute all the Popla people for this treachery, if this old man wouldn't give him 50 million. Astaroth sighed and reminded her master not to interfere, and suddenly, two men called Lord Getty. The people were glad to see one of the leaders of one of the 4 sacred guilds, named Mashiro, with his subordinate Copper. Getty was surprised and explained the actions of these townspeople couldn't be overlooked, but Copper calmly said that Lord Getty was a kind soul and surely wouldn't want to see people suffer. The nobleman gritted his teeth because his plan failed, so he told the old man, the town's Mayo, to ensure the next fruit he brings is proper. The people were relieved to hear their lives were being spared, but these two figured out how disgusting their scam was. Meanwhile, Faf finally saw Fen running towards somewhere. She chased the creature, and at the end of the street, a group of boys was ganging up on the beastman for selling a rotten fruit to their mayor. They said he had betrayed the city and swore they would never buy Papla fruit from him again. The beastman worriedly said no because their family would die if their business were lost. They pushed him and wished him to get unalive, and a group of men heard it. They belonged to the violent gang called Parasite, which made the beastmen gasp in fear. The young boys immediately ran off to keep their noses off the dangerous situation. An apple fell and rolled to the ground, but the gangster stomped on it to shatter it to pieces. His eyes got watery because these first-rate fruits were loved and grown by him and his father. The bald guy smirked and lifted his leg to smash his head when a small creature looking like a dog growled at them. He looked at it in surprise, but before these gangsters attacked Fen, Kai spoke from above, telling Fen not to set the town on fire. The men looked behind and saw Fafnir and Astaroth, so one of the men walked to them and said tourists shouldn't concern themselves with the town's business, but Kai kicked him down, saying he would stick his knee instead. The remaining 3 gasped and activated their magic powers. When the 2 released their fire and water spell to Kai, he remained calm and thought he would only need one of them to be alive. He burst his destructive fire on the 2, and their screaming voices lingered around the place. They were burnt to their grave, and all that was left was the bald guy. The beastman thanked Kai for saving him and healing his wounds, so he smiled back, tossed the ingredient to Faf, and told them to take the boy to their place. The 2 followed his order, so Kai faced this egghead because he wanted to meet the parasite's boss. Moments later, Rose finally finished baking, and they all loved the taste of the cake. Rose asked why Kai wouldn't be back tonight, so Astaroth said he had an investigation to do. Rose took a bite of the cake and decided to save it for Kai, but the cake might not be safe with this dragon nearby. A few kilometers from Papla town, inside the soap jungle, a man inside a cave activated his magic circle to revive a monster, a legendary beast that he commanded to devour everything in its path. Kai noticed the immense power from that summoning and interrupted him from plucking this guy's teeth. When Kai returned to the inn, Anna scolded him for interfering with the town matters. She was angry because this might put the princess in danger, so he apologized and explained this conspiracy involved nobles connected to the Amelia royal family, which concerns the princess. Rose was surprised by the news and asked if there was anything she could do to help, so he told her to gather people to hold a beast folk information session. The next day, they gathered people to showcase how their town's prosperity lies in high-quality agricultural goods produced by beast folks because there were people taking advantage of them, like this nobleman who plans to monopolize the farmland, a guild seeking fame, a mayor who discriminates, and thugs would do anything for money. Beelzebub showed footage where they all worked together to drive the beast folk out of the town and even gathered for a meeting to plan their convincing act. It was clear how they all staged it, making the beastmen watching the video gasped and shocked to see grinning, excited to put the beastmen out of their place. Beelzebub got this footage thanks to his expertise in interrogation and torture. The people couldn't believe their mayor, renowned guild coin, and the rest could orchestrate a bandit attack on the town. Anna became worried because this might cause chaos, and it would be too late before they could get reinforcement from the palace. The young beastman tried to calm everyone down because they knew no one would believe such a terrible truth. He was getting hopeless after his parents collapsed from stress, but Kai patted him and asked what he wanted to do. The boy clenched his fist and said he would protect this town from them. The beastmen who heard him paused, and the realization struck them. They agreed with him because they knew no fruits being sold from that boy's family were rotten. The boy's eyes glimmered as he watched the people round up to work together and figure it out. He thanked Kai for his help but told the boy this town was his to protect. A woman nearby worriedly said they were only mere farmers, and most of them were women and children, so no one knew how to fight. Kai said he could win over the thugs himself, but he couldn't stay there to protect the town forever, so he encouraged them to use their strength and work together for their race. He asked who would come with him to fight for their freedom and future, and everyone started cheering, morale striking up to the sky. Days passed by, and the guy inside a cave in the forest was planning to unleash the beast named Tubtetsu on Papla town. Lord Nail, the demon woman, said he should make sure to complete the mission because it cost them a lot, but Dilma told her not to worry because he wasn't like them, weak demons. A subordinate cursed him for insulting their lord, so Dilma glared at him and commanded him to melt away. Lord Nail tried to ask for her subordinate, but Dilma told her to calm down because they were important sponsors, so he would let the rest of them live. A bug hiding behind a rock heard them talking about retreating to Ball City. It immediately flew out and went its way back to his master. Kai noticed the grasshopper and heard the news about an unknown force and demon planning to invade Palpa. It was night already, and they were watching over the town, waiting to witness the result of the beastman's training. A group of bandits in disguise was on the rooftop, and their leader was grinning devilishly as they were about to attack the beast folk. They howled at the moon as they rushed to the town. When a man was about to slaughter the people in the house, the boy spoke. The bandit noticed him, and before he could finish telling him to drink milk to sleep, he was slapped at his marbles. The impact threw the bandit off balance and unconscious. Fen commended Shira, and the boy was amazed because a few days prior to this, Nemia gathered the beast folks to train. Another creature named Norn was summoned, and he manipulated the time to slow it down. Faf smirked because he would be training them as well, and for their first task, they had to run 500 kilometers and 500 push-ups and squats. The beastmen were truly outnumbered by the bandits, so he tried training them to master a one-strike attack to ensure their victory and showcase their capabilities to the town. On the other side, inside the mayor's office, Getty was all flushed because the mayor had chosen such beauty for him tonight. He grabbed her thigh but was kicked in the face in a blink. The woman was fast-moving and easily took down the count. She looked down at him and said it was for dirtying Shira's papla fruits and to head on to the mayor to teach him a lesson. Meters from there, the beast folks were all doing well capturing the bandits. Their strength had incredibly increased, making them feel confident about protecting the town with their hands. Rose didn't think training these beastmen in a short time would be possible, but she was glad it worked out. Kai noticed her and told her not to let her guard down because it was just the beginning. Rose was left confused and watched Kai jump off the roof. The people woke up, and the leader of the Coin Guild, Cider, stopped the beastmen from colluding with the bandits to attack their town. Shira gritted his teeth because they were being framed. They all gasped when Kai put down a pile of bandits cosplaying beastmen. He asked one man who ordered them, and the man immediately said the Coin Guild ordered them. Caleb clenched his jaw because the town wouldn't believe what a bandit would say, but inside his mind, he was wondering why the bandits were dressed like this. Kai explained that the beast folks captured every bandit, and the Coin Guild orchestrated everything. Cider drew his sword and continued saying it was the beast folks' doing. He slashed his weapon to Kai, asking who he was. Caleb released his weapon, binding thorns towards Kai, but he just wrapped it around his arm and said his full name. He gripped it tightly and pulled, dragging them along and crashing. The two groaned in pain after crashing into the wall. The coin members gasped in shock because their leaders were taken down easily. Kai dusted off his palm, saying he was only helping those in trouble, and looked at the Coin Guild, asking if they still wanted to be a hero. On the other side of the city, two men were running, saying they couldn't believe the news about Kai Hyman, the incompetent. They learned he also became Princess Rose's guard, and the elf couldn't believe he was involved in the town's uproar with his swordsmanship. He had seen his skills and knew it was impossible for him to destroy the parasite gang. The man sighed as they ran, saying the news had come from the princess. These people were the ones Rose requested cooperation with to stop a conspiracy. They were informed about the information, and they were from the Central Hunter Guild. The elf ranker was Olga, and the other was the chief of the investigation department named Johnson. They hid behind a wall and noticed some thugs bringing a woman to the mayor's house. Olga was tasked to secure the count and mayor, while Johnson went to search for the leader. Olga confidently called out to the mayor, saying he would ask him some questions, but he went silent when the nobleman groaned as he flew past him. He smashed into the wall unconscious. While he wondered if he wasn't hallucinating, the beast woman asked if he was from the Hunter Guild, and the moment he said yes confusedly, she smiled and said she would be joining her companions. The men were left to Olga, and before she left, she said if it weren't for him, she would have left them with one of Kai's subordinates. He was dumbfounded as he waved back, and as he wondered who that subordinate was, he felt a chilling sensation behind him. His scream echoed, and it almost made it to the moon. On the other side, outside the town walls, the Coin Guild members gathered. Johnson was called by his men and heard that the thieves were the ones who attacked the town and were captured by the beast folks. He was surprised because someone like Kai rounded them up outside the walls. Suddenly, an echoing growl from monsters lingered around the town. The ground was shaking, and Anna, who was at the center of the town, could hear the noise. The princess was annoyed because his royal guard was being too reckless. When Fafnir heard incoming footsteps, Astaroth said it was fine. The chief of the investigation was pale, huffing for air, and worriedly looked for the princess. An unknown man alerted Anna, so Johnson apologized and introduced himself, but Anna couldn't help but wonder why he looked so nervous. When Johnson revealed that something had occurred to the town, they were confused and about to ask, but a loud roar reached their ears. The chief told them one of the great four beasts of the world was awakened because the seal on Totetsu had been broken. Before this monster appeared, the Coin Guild was confused about why Kai healed them and gathered them outside. He replied, telling them that aspiring heroes like them should protect the town from monsters. At that moment, many tentacles came out of the ground and spat out multiple different monsters to attack them. They gasped in shock, and Caleb thought this Totetsu monster was said to require the might of a hero, the four guilds, and a melee kingdom's army to take it down. Their leader exclaimed that it was impossible, but Kai blankly said it was their duty to slay these monsters and show courage. The guild members screamed and tried going back to the city, but a barrier surrounded it. Nimia smirked because his wall was effective. Kai told them they shouldn't worry about being out of town so they could fight without holding back. Caleb begged him and said he was dragged into this because of Getty and the mayor. Cider said it was Caleb's idea and started arguing. They didn't notice the flying monster charging at Caleb and was eaten alive. His blood was all over the place, making the members shake in fear. Cider cursed and attacked it because they had no other choice. The bell at the center of the village was rung to alert the people about the attack. The chief still pondered how this beast broke free and suspected Kai of doing it because of his immense power. Rose frowned because this might be the gravest disaster, one that even a hero's power might not be enough to stop, so he ordered them to assist with the evacuation and request reinforcements from Amelia, but Jeremicalis stopped them. He said it wouldn't be necessary because he had captured the others. The chief was surprised when he placed the nobleman, mayor, and Olga. Olga woke up, wondering how he got there, and when Juri said he fainted upon seeing him, Olga looked at Guri and saw that his soul had left his body. He looked at the princess and told her reinforcements were unnecessary, but she was worried about how strong this beast could be. He asked Astaroth to assist with the evacuation. She snapped her fingers and a screen showed the view outside the town while she told the princes Kai had ordered them to keep her safe in this place. Cider slashed his long vines at the monster with full force because of frustration at seeing his men perish one by one. The path they chose for money and fame had led them to this, making him realize the truth. He slashed his weapon while huffing for air and thought it would be impossible to defeat them all like this, so as the leader, he called his people to tell them this would be the coin's moment to shine and prove themselves. The people screamed, making the Totetsu growl at them in anger. It's true from what was revealed, making them feel a shiver down their spine. Before they knew it, the beast men had joined forces with Coin. Cider was surprised, but Shira told them he did it to keep them alive so they could get a proper punishment as culprits of this incident. The monster was getting pissed, so he deployed his tail, the huge viper, but in a blink, the boy kicked its face and blasted a few more hits to defeat it. Kai asked if Shira really wanted to help people who tried selling them slavery. The boy replied that he did despise them, but letting them perish would mean they were no better than them. Kai nodded and decided to leave this guild's fate to them and watch over their battle. He called the rest of the beastmen to begin the second wave of the battle against the Totetsu beast. The people inside the village prayed and hoped for everyone's safety as they watched them. The beast folks agreed to take the main body down to prevent more monsters from spawning, but Kai noticed someone hiding behind a tree. He wondered if this man was controlling these monsters, but when Totetsu was nearly pinned down, he called Jiruma to lend him a hand. The man on the tree finally stepped on the spotlight and called the beast pathetic. He smirked and took the soul domination orb out of his pocket. Jiruma chuckled devilishly and pierced the orb to the beast's head for an experiment. The monster gasped in shock and asked him what he had done. A surge of mana flowed through his body, an enhancement orb, to resurrect his tail. The beast folk noticed its increase in strength, but they were too late to realize it. Shira called Salyupa worriedly after the hit and landed a kick to the snake's eyes. The viper glared at him, and his attack seemed not to work anymore. The others were already struggling, making Shira get stoned in fear. Kai moved to save him when the snake tried to snap his head off. He commended everyone for their work and called Nenya to order him to evacuate everyone inside his barrier. It only took him a few seconds to teleport there and take them back to the city. Kai looked straight to the enemy and drew his sword out, while Jiruma laughed as he commanded the beast to devour everyone. Kai glared as if they should have never interfered with the beast folk story to stand up to protect their town. Jiruma noticed him clucking like a chicken, and when Kai used his second form to annihilate the small fry, they were surprised. Kai did a final attack with his lightning flash technique. Totetsu's scream echoed through the barrier, and when Jiruma noticed his pet started acting weird, he tried calling it. Kai stood up, and that was when Jiruma realized his beast had been defeated with one strike. The Totetsu monster exploded and vanished into the air, making Jiruma shake in disbelief. Kai reminded him he wouldn't show mercy to a fool like him, so Jiruma started begging him to spare his life and promised to tell him whatever he wanted. But behind him was his last trick. Kai sighed because he knew he was only acting to use his orb and transform. Jiruma clenched his jaw and placed the orb on his chest while commanding himself to maintain his rationality with all his might. His body absorbed the orb and started twitching like a zombie on the train to Busan. When he attained his final form, Kai blankly told him not to waste time and attack him. Jiruma cursed him and blew an attack because he talked too much. When the orb was nearing Kai, it was slapped to the side and faded. Jiruma gasped when he realized what had happened to him, so he released multiple attacks at him, and as expected, it was deflected. Jiruma was getting frustrated because the power of his words wasn't working on him, so Kai told him why. It was because he was too weak and slammed his fist to his stomach. Jiruma crashed and glided through the forest and crashed into a huge tree. He was badly wounded and couldn't move anymore, so Kai called Bells, the torture master, to extract any information from this guy. The people of Papla Town were relieved to see the monster defeated. Kai is now a walking god now. All the mundane human problems are for his entertainment only. The men from the Hunters Guild came to him to invite him for a talk. Johnson thanked him for helping the town, and a few days after that long night, the people celebrated the victory over beers and a feast. The princess was still there, and she could see how the townspeople always surrounded him to thank him and keep him company. Shura called Kai to ask if he would be leaving tomorrow. The people were surprised and asked him to stay longer, but Kai told them they would definitely meet again. Olga grabbed his shoulder to tell him not to worry them too much, and at the rooftop where the princess tea party was happening, Fafnir was so excited to eat Rose's cake. Astaroth mentioned that the Coin Guild and Parasite Bandits were taken care of. She smirked because she knew they were going through something terrifying at the moment. The princess poured tea into their cups, and as she sat down, she wondered what strength Kai had to annihilate that beast easily. Astaroth proudly said their master alone could defeat that small fry and wouldn't need any help from the government. The Mayo and Count were sent to the capital to face the death penalty due to Anna's detailed letter. Since the town seat to the mayor was vacant, the princess recommended appointing a woman she thought was wise and compassionate, a perfect fit to be a mayor. Their new Papla town would be ideal for both beast folk and humans. When the princess noticed Kai was missing, she sighed because she missed her chance to give Kai a taste of her sweet cake. Speaking of Kai, he had been hiding away from the people to recharge his social battery when he came across Fen and one of his subordinates who had foxtails. Fen jumped to him to greet him, but the woman flirtingly grabbed him, apologizing to her hubby for the lack of attention she had been giving. He almost drowned from those melons, and after a few hours, he was exhausted from getting them to sleep. He closed his eyes as he remembered his childhood friend Rina. He slept, thinking of continuing this charade as a royal guard. He also recalled the moment after defeating the Totetsi. The princess called Kai, and he sighed because he knew Rose would compliment his handsome face, but Rose told him she was glad he was her royal guard. He was caught off guard and reminded her it was temporary. Rose chuckled as she nodded at him. He suddenly looked at the ceiling, wondering if he was only gaslighting himself and just wanted to stay by the princess's side. Fafnir mumbled through her sleep, asking if Rose's cake was delicious, so he said yes and drifted to sleep. The next morning at the capital of Amelia's kingdom, Keith was walking in the hall and heard a rushing footstep and a high-pitched voice. Rena called him and told him she would be heading to Balls to see Rose and Kai. Keith got confused, so she slapped the paper to his face to read the princess letter. He read it and realized Kai was indeed traveling with the princess, and before he could even talk, Rena told him to get ready for departure. Keith stopped her and told her it would be impossible with their position, so she winked, telling him they would go undisguised, and ran off, leaving him speechless because he knew their master would scold them. Meanwhile, in Ghost Town, a man seated on an expensive chair told his subordinates that Jiruma had perished. Everyone was surprised and asked their captain if it was real, so the man nodded as they figured someone capable of annihilating him was lurking around. The woman in the pigtail said they hadn't finished the first task, but the captain said they could just crush their client later. The captain called Vinegar and Salt to investigate and activate those ruins, and the rest would head and wipe out the Popla because the captain believed the calamity didn't tolerate failure. On the other side, Lord Nail was anxiously staying in her mansion in a cave when one of her men returned and said number 33 hadn't come back. These men were told to stay off the case, so she realized there had been a new sacrifice. She was frustrated because she had to remain strong until she fulfilled her mission as an aide to the demon King Asmedia. She apologized to the king and stood up to tell everyone to search for the sacrifices who would serve as their offerings to trigger the ruin spell. Nail gritted her teeth and hoped that everything would go well in the name of her demon lord. At the same time, in the Babylon Palace, a demonic army named Pazuzu reported that their analysis of the ruins was done, and he was certain he could open the gate for Tiamat. She giggled excitedly about the news. While these two embarked on a journey to Papla, the calamity was also on its way to the town to spread havoc and destroy everything. These two women's goals were still unknown, yet they were determined and eager to achieve them. But all this was happening now that Kai and the princess left the town. Will the Papla survive the upcoming storm? Along the way, Arnold caught up to the carriage and informed them they could return to the royal capital in about 2 weeks, so they had to stay in Balls. It was a long delay for them, but Kai thought it was fine because he had business to settle. He went to the Hunter Guild of Balls, where hunters from all over the world gather for high-level monster hunting. This town was a place that naturally had many jobs available for people, so having a hunter's license would help him earn money quickly. While the others looked for an inn, he planned to register as a hunter, and little did he know that Johnson, the chief, was watching over him. Hunters were divided into 6 ranks based on evaluation from completed jobs and requests. He came to the reception desk and asked the woman about the process of becoming a hunter. When the receptionist said it would cost him 10,000 ores, he opened his item box. The woman gasped in amazement, so he denied it as he realized it was considered a rare skill. The woman apologized and took the money to start the process. Kai told himself he should be more careful about his items and skills, and when the woman placed a magic crystal, he was asked to touch it to get his information. Kai knew he had to suppress his power to the novice level, but he didn't know the average status of a typical novice hunter, so he just wore his items to lower them. He just hoped it was low enough, and when he touched the crystal, the receptionist screamed in shock, stealing everyone's attention. The people nearby looked, so she immediately apologized. A man walked to them and laughed when he noticed Kai had the gift of incompetence. The monkeys made fun of him and waved goodbye to Mia, the receptionist. She sighed and apologized again to him, but he said it was alright and that spreading it would help him, making Mia wonder if he enjoyed being mocked. She took the tablet, and when she saw her strength value at 12, she gasped again. While Mia was apologizing, Kai was relieved he put on a fake ring that would look like a stat-boosting ring. He tried removing it and suppressed his power even more. When the registration was done, he got out and remembered Mia telling him not to show the ring publicly. Kai made a detour to face the punks who had been following him. The chief asked Ilsa Harnish to tail Kai a few minutes before this. She couldn't believe this supposed to be S-ranker was looking after Maria Heineman's son, but Johnson just pushed him out of the room and told her to see it for herself. Ilsa sighed and annoyingly went to the reception hall and saw the kid at the counter. She heard people talking bad about the kid for being a traitor and an incompetent human. She laid low as she eavesdropped over these two men planning to steal the ring that looked like a national treasure, and that was how she got to this situation. She knew these people were thieves, making her realize how their guild's reputation had declined. Before reaching this point, Mia even rushed to her and asked her to keep an eye on Kai after leaving the guild, and she had no choice but to babysit this kid after all. When one of the men grabbed Kai's collar, Ilsa drew her dagger to attack, but Kai had already kicked him off. The man flew to the roof beside her, shocking her. She couldn't believe someone with that gift was single-handedly taking the hunters down alone. Kai noticed her presence, so she hid behind the wall. Ilsa's heart was racing as she wondered how that kid saw through her presence Arasher's skill. But the chief arrived, asking if she finally realized that this kid's strength was unimaginable. She asked if he was planning to use him, but Johnson said he didn't want to make Kai his enemy. A few days after this incident, someone from a luxurious residential area heard about what happened because the monkey who got their butt kicked told their mama about it. The card guild leader, Mahig, cursed them for being weak and asked if they had more info about him. One man said his gift was the most useless one they had ever heard and said that the eyewitnesses of the fall of Totetsu stated that Kai was the one to take it down. They thought the ring he wore made him this strong because there was no logical explanation for him pulling that out. The man chugged his wine down and angrily crushed it with his hands. He laughed devilishly and said those arrogant heroes wouldn't stand against him if he stole that ring. The Asian guy said that they should exploit Kai's weakness and mentioned the receptionist Kai had been going out with. Mahig smirked, saying he would do anything and take everything that kid had. Days slipped by quickly, and it was Balsa's masquerade festival. Mia, Kai, and the little girl went together. Fafnir was a little too excited about this festival and planned to visit every food stall. She was eating like a dragon, so Mia wiped the sauce off her mouth. When Faf thanked her and gave Mia her food, Kai was surprised because it was the first time she shared, and she thought she had gotten attached to Mia. Astaroth was also with them, keeping an eye on those people who had been watching them for the past few days. So Kai summoned Shirayuki out and ordered her to gather details about those people and make the judgment herself. When she left, Mia was pulled by Faf to the stalls. They looked for the available foods, and when Kai and Mia's eyes met, she was flustered and looked away shyly. Hours passed by when they decided to go home. As they were walking, Kai thanked Mia for playing with Faf. The princess couldn't easily attend festivals due to her high position, and Anna wasn't the type to leave her alone, but it was a good thing Mia offered to come along. Mia smiled at him, saying she would hang out with them and talk to him again soon, but Kay didn't hear it. When he asked what she said, she panicked, making Astaroth smirk. Mia bid her goodbyes to them, so Fafnir embraced her to say goodbye. She left with a smile on her rosy cheeks, making Astaroth sigh because their blockhead master couldn't read the situation. Shirayuki returned and reported to her master about the guild called Card, which used a hostage to try to blackmail him. Kai was mad, and his insanity was creeping in again. Everyone felt the immense dark aura from him, so Rose carefully asked if Shirayuki was referring to the hunters targeting Kai recently, but Kai kicked their butts off easily every time they attacked. He regrets not ending their lives because they had taken Mia to use her to take Kai down. Kai looked at Shirayuki, wondering if she had interfered because she couldn't stand idly by without his orders. Before she could explain, someone had emerged from the ground. It was Nemesis, one of his subordinates. She told him she had already assigned her subordinate to monitor the hostage in a guild, but he told them it wouldn't be needed because he would rescue her himself. He stood up and was about to head out when the princess worriedly offered to send her troops to them because that guild had repeatedly committed crimes. Kai told her it was alright and thought Mia had gotten caught up because of him. Nemesis smirked and commended their master. She said she would prepare a perfect ruinous scenario for the card guild. He nodded, and suddenly, a maid handed him a letter. A few moments earlier before this, Mia was happily humming as she walked, and when a picture of Kai flashed in her head, she shook her head because she had been thinking about him all day. She sat on a barrel frustratedly as she realized she had started looking forward to seeing him, and it made her worried because she might be abusing her staff privileges at this point. She looked at the starry sky and wondered if she would be alright with never seeing him again. Just thinking about it made her heart ache, but suddenly, two men grabbed her in the darkness. She tried to scream, but it was muffled. Shirayuki and Nemesis witnessed everything, but they didn't do anything. Mia was brought to the residential area, where she noticed it was the church on the outskirts of town. The leader of the card guild went down to greet their visitor. She stood looking around and figured they were from card guild, so she told them assaulting a guild employee would put them to the grave. Mahiyu said they needed her as leverage to punish Kai and steal the OP ring. She was surprised because they had only met earlier, and she told him there was no way he would come there, but this Asian guy laughed at her. He said they were currently in a relationship and soon to be engaged. Mia turned into a tomato from what she heard and realized they might have seen them talking about a ring earlier. She stuttered, making them think it was the truth. The men gathered around her, and a man with a big build grinned as he said they would enjoy her last moments. She screamed in fear, making him more excited, so he ripped her top, exposing the Mariana's trench. Mahiyu laughed as they watched her cry. Mia bit her lips and thought it was her fault for getting their eyes set on Kai. She lifted her head and fiercely bumped her head against the man's nose. He groaned in pain as he noticed blood dripping down his nose. The slap took her last energy, so she had no choice but to accept her fate. In a blink, Kai was holding the man's wrist. She smiled as she closed her eyes because, in the end, she still wanted to see him there for her. Kai tightened his grip and pulled its arm off his body. The people stepped back upon seeing the terrifying sight. Kai even tossed a hand to them before he crouched to apologize to Mia for being late. She was unconscious, so he wrapped her in one of his items, a white robe that would protect her from any form of attack. When he saw her bruises, Kai lost his sanity. The moment when the men saw an opening, they launched at him all at once. They swung their sword at him, but Kai barehandedly took them down. The remaining guild members started shaking in fear, but Mahiyu was impressed at the ring for boosting this brat's strength like this. When Kai set his eyes on the leader, Mahiyu pondered if he should rethink his choices, but it was too late because he had already given him an invitation letter. When Kai received that letter, he learned that they were after his ring in exchange for the hostage. It was a despicable threat from a fool, so Kai told everyone he would go to the residence while Nemesis proceeded with her plan. Now going back, Kai had his blade pointed at Mahiyu, asking him if he thought he could escape this place in one piece after all he had done. Well, that was a fun way to go to hell. Mahiyu's sweat was dripping because he was caught off guard by a kid. He cursed, and in a blink, he immediately teleported to Mia, but Kai remained calm. He laughed devilishly because his teleportation ring turned the tables around. This fool even ordered him to take his gloves off and hand over the ring if he wanted his woman to stay alive. His subordinates screamed, so Kai granted his wish. Nemesis was listening outside the door and was shocked to hear their master was removing his restraint to face them. They didn't have a choice but to go inside. Mahiyu looked at them confusedly when Kai said he was getting excited, making Astaroth panic. Kai gave Nemesis a signal, so she shrunk through the floor, teleported to Mia, and saved her from the orangutan. Mahi cursed at him for using hidden reinforcements, so he tossed the ring to him, and it almost fell off his palm. He was laughing out loud as he put on the ring. While he was celebrating his ring, Kai sighed because he was no different from those who depended on their gifts, and cider was better than them. Mahiyu shut him up because he had nothing to fear now and ordered his men to tear him apart. The guild members screamed as they attacked him at once, but despite being outnumbered, Kai was 100,000 stronger than these fools. He swung his sword using his first form, the brink of death, and with that, most of Mahiyu's men were chopped off to death. The leader was still alive, screaming in pain because his fingers and arm were cut off. He was shaking as he asked Kai if he gave him a fake ring, but Kai said he didn't because he had never used ability-enhancing equipment from the beginning because, with or without those things, he was still far too strong for monkeys like them. He released his last attack, and the explosion left the two weak. Kai called bells to make these two taste hell while keeping them alive. When they were gone, Nemesis appeared and said she had brought someone who was interested in this incident. Isla and Johnson came out of the portal Nemesis made, so Kai told them not to worry because they would hand those two over. The chief said it was fine because the card had been disbanding, and their leader would be sentenced to hanging for all his crimes. Kai faced Nemesis and asked what her plan was for letting Nia get abducted, but she just smirked and said they only set the stage. Kai was confused. Astaroth sighed in disbelief because he was so dense. Ezla called him and asked him to take Mia back to her dorm, but Kai wondered if it would be more appropriate if the guild members escorted her back. Johnson butted in, saying they had a lot of work to do, so his subordinates smiled, telling him to go and escort her. Kai took Mia, put her on his back, and walked to the pathway back to the dorm. Nemesis took a deep breath, looking at the ruined place, but when Astaroth said it wasn't even their master's 0.01% strength, she was surprised. No one in this world could challenge him, so they knew they had to give Kai a reason to stay in this world, a reason to live, not just for fighting. The path was silent, and he could hear Mia's breathing and heartbeat. When she woke up, he greeted her and said he would be taking her to the dorm. He apologized for putting her through this, but she shyly said she should be the one apologizing for the trouble. She thanked him, and feeling his warmth made her cheeks red. She got down and said she could go alone since the dorm was nearby. She embraced him and thanked him for saving her. He looked at her, saying it was only natural, and when they parted, they exchanged smiles and waved goodbye. Meanwhile, Nemesis and Astaroth got frustrated because this stone-hearted guy should have at least walked her to her room and gone all the way. Ilsa chuckled upon hearing them and asked what they witnessed. Nemesis smiled as she said they shared the same fate with Kai, and they swore never to harm anything he wished to protect, and before he could reply, they sank into darkness. The two guild members missed their chance to thank them. Johnson scratched his head for stirring a bigger fish by relying on this incident with the kid. Isla was somehow terrified by his unimaginable strength, making her think she couldn't bring herself to believe they could be bad people. The next day, when Kai was returning, the princess was glad to notice his bright face, and she assumed everything went well. Anna sighed because Kai was too reckless to save a commoner when he was assigned as a royal guard, but Rose defended him. The princess calmed her down because she might be exhausted from waiting all night for Kai, so she decided to push her to the room to rest while Anna continued ranting and backstabbing Kai. It was already morning when they finally decided to sleep, and when the princess drifted through her sleep, Anna went out, still couldn't believe her lady had placed absolute trust in Kai. Anna was marching angrily down the bridge, and even stopped midway to scream Kai's name in frustration. All this happened because she got offended when Kai indirectly said the king and Princess Rose were responsible for the kingdom's devastation. Rose was surprised by her reaction, but Kai stuck to his word that the royalties failed to guide their people and country where discrimination and poverty ran rampant. When he calls them incompetent, Anna snaps at him and says her lady constantly thinks about her people. Rose raised her voice to calm her maid, and seeing her lady not taking her side, made her storm out of the room. Rose apologized, but Kai asked if it was right for Anna to be alone, so the princess said it was best to leave her be. Fafnir came in, reminding them it was snack time, and she wanted some cookies. Rose smiled and suddenly remembered she had run out of tea, which goes well with cookies. Since only Kai was there to ask, she asked him to tell Anna to buy the usual tea. He nodded as he thought it might be a chance for them to reconcile. Going back to the bridge, she finally released the accumulated anger. She looked around to calm down and heard a kid looking at Lord Era's statue, the god who judges people's virtue based on their gifts. The kid turning 13 was always excited to get their blessings, but those born with useless gifts were trampled upon and looked down upon. Even the beast folk suffered because they possessed no blessings. Anne came from a prestigious family of knights and believed their kingdom's values were absolute, but the more she tried to uphold her pride as a knight, the stronger her doubts grew. Her thoughts were interrupted when she noticed a man whipping a beast folk. She walked closer and realized how discrimination was openly accepted. She thought knights were supposed to protect people and wondered what Kai would do in this situation. She pushed through the crowd and stopped the man with the pronouns of her and her. The man frowned at her and told her not to interrupt her product promotion, but Anna exclaimed that the beastfold were still people and had feelings. The man pointed at her as he figured she came from the kingdom. The ones who decided beast folk were traitors. Anna denied it, but Kai stood between them before she could talk more, apologizing for her nakedness. Anna was fuming mad, but the man calmed down because he was only presenting his product to his customers. Kai took his 80,000 ore and threw it to him. The man smirked because he understood his business and said since this beast woman was silver-furred, his money would only be a down payment and he needed 2 million more. Kai agreed and told him to treat the child with care until he got the 2 million, making Anna drop her jaw in shock. The deal was settled, so until the handover, the child would be treated as an important guest. When they left, the child glanced back at him. Anna was trembling in anger, so she grabbed his collar and said he engaged in human trafficking by buying a person with money. Kai sighed and explained that the slave trade was legal in the Emilia Kingdom, and if they took the child with force, that would put the princess in a tight spot. Anna was speechless because she finally understood that a monetary buyout was the only way to protect her. He told her the lady had asked her to buy her usual tea since he had run out of money. Anna sighed because he foolishly threw all his money to buy a stranger's freedom, but she knew the country's problem could be resolved by fighting it together. Before she left, Kai finally called her by her name and told her she had done great earlier. When they returned, Rose was surprised because they needed 2 million money to get the kid to safety. Anna apologized for not being able to help, but the princess fully supported purchasing that child's freedom, which worried them as it could lead to scandal. Kai asked for her opinion on how to get a large sum of money within 30 days, so she suggested selling her uncle's memento, the Ring of Resurrection, but they refused. The princess then mentions the Holy Martial Tournament in Ruzahal, the kingdom's biggest tournament. Kai did not hesitate to go there because he could meet strong people there. He came to register, but thinking about the rule made him wince because if he killed his opponent, he would be disqualified. He had to suppress and control his power to prevent that. When he was walking through the crowd, he felt something tingling. He looked around because that killing intent came from this tall man. The man towered over him as he said he was strong. Kai smirked because he reminded him of Nemia when they first met. The man asked his name, so he introduced himself. This is Zas from Group B33, and he was starting to look forward to their battle. Meanwhile, at the ghost town, Tiamat went to their lord's manor to inform him about Kai Heineman's information. As they read through her report, the man in the bandana sighed because Tiamat couldn't figure out why she couldn't see through the walls after Kai took off his gloves. The only thing Tiamat was certain about was that Kai had taken the card guild down by himself. The member was pressing her, she was certain, but when their lord started laughing, they went silent. He lifted his head and said Kai Heineman would definitely join them because they would be cutting his Achilles tendon. Tiamat smirked and stabbed her dagger through the picture of Rena and Keith. On the day of the tournament, Kai was fueled by his desire to free that girl and the experience he would get from this tournament. They were still on their way to Ruzahal, and Kai was still going through the rule book. The princess came along since they wouldn't be granted permission to return to the capital without Arnold as an escort. When their carriage stopped at the entrance, Rose told him not to worry because he had saved many by now, and for some reason, Kai felt this woman was tricking him. But he had no choice. The place was buzzing with people after he registered his name. But when he was about to return to the carriage, a man called him a useless loser. A professor angrily told Kai he had some nerve to show his face there. But when they noticed his registration card, the instructor said he was dragging their dojo's name through the mud. This man was Siga, an assistant instructor of the Heineman style, and his attitude changed when they learned about his gift. Kai turned around and blankly said he left the Heineman's sword style the moment he moved out. Siga exclaimed that having the incompetent from their family join the tournament would disgrace them, but Rick told him to ignore the loser because he would take care of him later. Kai sighed because he had to face people like them in the preliminary round. 2 days passed by, and the preliminaries were already here. The arena was filled with buzzing people, and the first 100 participants had to collect 3 armbands to pass. When everyone was ready, the announcer banged the bell to start the battle officially. The people started their incantation, drew their swords out, and some even grouped together for a plan. Kai sighed because amateurs surrounded him, and he thought of swinging his sword in one strike to defeat everyone, but that would only cause him trouble by drawing attention to him. 3 people went behind him, and they were the 3 disciples of Siga. They planned to attack him but were arguing about who saw and came there first to take the credit for defeating him. So while they were at it, Kai sneakily snatched their armbands off. They didn't even notice it and were still arguing at that moment. Kai was walking away, making the 3 wonder if he was surrendering that quickly from the battle. He ignored them and asked the woman if he already passed. The woman gasped in shock because it hadn't even been a minute since the match started, yet he was done. When she got his registration number and name, he went out of the arena while hearing those 3 panicking because their armbands were missing. On the other side, a man spectating from the VIP area called Aaron he saw that boy below. Aaron couldn't utter a word because he knew that boy was the grandson of Elm Heineman, who stood shoulder to shoulder with his Kayan style in the kingdom. He remembered Kai receiving the weakest gift, but as far as he remembers, this kid's presence changed greatly. He said the kid's speed was only reachable by those with natural, true talent. The man beside him couldn't believe it because Kai was deemed useless. Aaron nodded and wondered why Elm hid such talent from the world. He even thought that he used the kid's gift as cover to prevent other factions from recruiting him. Since they knew Kai left the Hymen, he figured there would be no problem recruiting him into the Keian style and making him the next king's royal guard. Eren smirked because this year's tournament had become interesting due to the hidden gem lying in wait. After the preliminary round, it was already dark. Siga screamed Kai's name in a dormitory's room for using a dirty trick on his disciples. The three kids were convinced Kai cheated, and when they asked the judges to investigate, they were brushed off. They couldn't believe an incompetent trampled all over their hard work, and they decided to punish him. Roma came in and stopped them. He proudly told them he would take Kai down fair and square and expose his cheating with his own hands to clear their shame and wipe that stain from the Hymen name. The instructor agreed with him. Rick was planning to defeat the grandson of the main house so he would be the heir to their dojo. Their branch house would overpower the main house where Kai and his grandfather belong, and their family would be the next grandmaster. At the tavern in Balls, Kai's name was also being cursed by this D-class hunter, Rega Easter. He was pretty drunk. Hook, his teammate, wondered what Mia found in Kai to be so interested in him. Rega exclaimed he was more deserving of Mia, but when Hook said the two had been hanging out recently, Rega cursed, slamming the table in anger. The people in the tavern looked at him, making Rega snap, asking if they thought he was too loud. The men nearby told him to go to bed, making Rega want to punch their butts, but luckily his teammate held him off. Hook apologized to everyone and told Rega to take it easy and go home. When his teammates left, he noticed his drink was done. He cursed in the air, but someone poured him another drink. The man looked familiar to Rega, so he asked his name. The man introduced himself as Saul and said he heard Rega was the leader of the most promising team in Balls. Rega nodded, and when Saul asked him if he could go to the ancient temple in the Silk Forest, he spat his drink out. Rega couldn't believe this man was asking him to go to a place filled with monsters whom even an A-class wouldn't dare go. Saul said there are hiding treasures that would be perfect for her loved one. Rega cursed because, with his D-rank butt, there was no way he could get out of there alive, but Saul told him it would be fine because, with his pendant, he would become an S-class hunter instantly. After 100,000 years of struggle, the once incompetent Kai Hyman has become an unstoppable kid. From a walking disaster to a god among men, he now holds the power to conquer the world alone, but he still lays low. But as enemies grow and chaos looms, one question remains. Will Kai protect Princess Mia and their allies, or will he abandon them all, run berserk, and unleash havoc upon a world that no longer challenges him? Can Mia's love pull him back from the edge to calm his insanity, or is he lost to madness forever? Stay tuned, like, subscribe, and don't miss what happens next. Have a legendary day.